Welcome to another presentation for the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Today we have Done Estes. Hey, Don.
Hey,
I have to tell you my impression of Don. I used to think Don was crazy, and now I realize he's a genius, right? Of course,
that's
but
so.
it's really it's just the things coming through him are quite amazing. He's been doing cutting edge, I mean, serious cutting edge technologies and techniques for since the beginning of time. I mean, it's really doing some amazing work to help people on the planet. Don is the founder and director of InnerSense Incorporated and inventor of vibrasound sensory resonance technologies used by both professional and non-professionals all over the world for music and sound therapy, relaxation, entertainment, and expanded states of mind. His intellectual property is garnered from over 30 years' experience in the unification of science, philosophy, and religion, and includes theories, proprietary knowledge, and patents in the fields of light, color, sound, music, and algorithmic automata. His unique combination of experience in both the hard and soft sciences represents the essence of true neuroscience.
Mm.
So, what have you been up to lately?
Well, we've been just hanging in there through all of this lockdown. We were ready to move to our next project, which is moving away from this one-on-one type of thing that we've been doing for the past 30 years and opening it up to group kind of experiences. So our latest project is called Transcendome, which is the world's first group biofeedback technology that includes all of these sensory sciences. And we were ready to do that uh, and ready to really walk out the door to do it, but they started the shutdown and closed it all down. So we've been unable to do that. And I have now 30 of my tables and all of the projectors and the speakers and the equipment shoved into my house now, waiting for them to open us back up.
So in the dome, you said biofeedback. So you're going to hook up people while they're doing the experience in a group.
Yeah, you're familiar with our quantum biofeedback technology, the protocol, and its
Hmm.
upgrades. And so we have a tetrahedral mic that sits in the middle of the room that can pick up the expressions of everyone in the room.
Okay.
So we can have the group chanting or toning or speaking or in some other way inputting information into the technology. And then all that can be broadcast and projected onto the dome screen.
Uh-huh.
And since they're all laying flat on one of our tables, you're aware that you're with other people, but you can't really see them. It's not like one of the things that really bugs me at IMAX theater is that you have that big, huge, immersive screen, but then you see everybody else's heads in the way.
Uh-huh.
And this way you're lying flat on your back and
Oh.
the dome screen comes down below your periphery vision. So you are fully immersed into that visual.
Even then, and how many people? Like a couple of 1,500 or so?
No, right now we're down to 30 people inside of
Oh,
a
okay. Oh,
44-foot dome, 30 of our tables.
okay. Cool.
Um, I'll
Wow.
show you when I do when I open up one of the keynotes, I'll show you a picture of this idea of the transcendum. So it has 30 of our tables arranged to where they're socially distant apart. You know, it's a whole new ball game that we're dealing with here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The tables have to be cleaned every time before and after
Right.
people put on them and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of changes that are happening with it, but it's basically what you've seen us do with about five other new technologies that are audio-visual kinesthetic kind of technologies that can be introduced into this as well, such as cymatics and the color therapy thing that I was showing you earlier when we talked.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uh-huh. Cool.
several other new technologies that we've been working on that we've finally perfected and just creates an overall massive visual, auditory, and tactile experience.
Cool. Cool. So I got the big question for you that I've been asking everybody. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
Well, I would try to help them get into a state of mind where they can have an epiphany or an aha moment. To me, that seems to be the only thing that really works. With all the teachings and everything that you and I and everybody else is doing to explain all these things to people, that gets the information across, but it's really about the experience
Hmm.
rather than the talking about the experience. And when the experience, it has to go all the way past ooh and ah and oh that's amazing or oh that's
Cool.
that's really cool. It has to go beyond that to I want the people walking away saying I'll never be the same person again. That
Uh,
fundamentally shifted me in some way. And the only way I've really found to do that is to assist them into getting into a state of mind where they can have an epiphany or an aha
cool.
moment like that. And I don't think we have enough time to do it one on one. We've been doing this for, gosh, you and I've been doing this for a long time. And I was doing it even before that. We incorporated in 1984 since we've been doing this. And I've never found an experience that is greater than a person having an epiphany or an aha moment that really does
Uh-huh.
seriously change them.
Nice.
And so if I had all the money in the world, I would just use it to further along what we're doing now with this Transcendome project to where we can have these domes all over the world. If I had one of these domes in every major city in about 5 years worth of time, I think we could dramatically shift the planet.
Cool. Excellent. So, what is your presentation on today?
Well, I thought I would just cover some of the things I've been covering with your students
Mm-hmm.
in the classes that basically revolves around what I call vibrational therapy as opposed to sound therapy, because
Mm-hmm.
all these things that people talk about frequencies and sounds and colors and lights and all that, those are all different bands of reality that exist outside of the idea of just sound therapy. So I prefer to call it vibrational therapies because
Nice.
frequencies can be used in sound and light and color and tactile vibrations and all kinds of ways of affecting change on a person.
Yeah. Well, it's even not necessarily healing or therapy. It's also just getting people high and so they can have that aha moment, huh? Should be
Exactly.
vibrational aha.
Exactly. And so, yeah, about 20 years ago, we actually did a dramatic shift in our approach to all of this, where we almost did a 180-degree reversal regarding the whole concept of healing,
Mm-hmm.
because to heal people with this kinds of technology, you really need to find the harmony that's within a person. And that's never really been possible before because all human biometrics, such as brain waves and heartbeats and voice samples and that sort of thing, the frequency, the fundamental frequency drifts all over the place. We're like a musical instrument. As you're hearing me speak right now, the frequencies of my voice are drifting around, the pitches are drifting around. So it's been impossible to really nail down until recently. It's been impossible to nail down the actual fundamental frequency. So what people do instead of getting the fundamental frequency, they get the mode. So they take a
Mm.
time sample and then they average the sample and they get the average frequency. They don't really
Mm.
get the fundamental frequency. They get the
Yeah.
average
Yeah.
frequency.
There's other systems that look at the fundamental frequency of each syllable. And so they're looking not at an average at all. They're looking at how many times you actually hit that fundamental on each syllable. That's some, and then there's others that are actually not even looking at it fundamental. In fact, most of the voice analysis systems don't really do fundamentals at all. They're looking at the all the different harmonics that are coming through your voice.
Right. Well, if you can't really know what the true harmonics are unless you know that fundamental, because if you look at a
Mm.
person's voice or their brain or whatever, all kind of frequencies show up there that don't have anything to do with the fundamental frequency.
Uh-huh. So
And
what's the alternative? What's the solution for it?
you actually have to find the true fundamental frequency. So
Hmm.
I've posted on our website the method that we use to actually determine the true fundamental frequency.
It's interesting because when you talk about fundamental frequency, because there's also the home note of the key of the song that someone is singing. And that's really the main fundamental I think of when people are speaking. Because if you're going through, I mean, if you're talking about finding a one fundamental, then it's going to be there isn't. I mean, every single syllable is a different note and has a different fundamental. So
Right.
you can find the key of the song they're singing, and that would be the fundamental note of the whole of everything they sing, right?
Well, that would be an averaged out, what we call the mode rather than the fundamental frequency. That would be the mode of all of those frequencies that were played, kind of
Mm,
averaged together uh, to um, to come up with what you're calling the fundamental frequency there.
yeah,
But the
well, it's the key
fundamental
of the
frequency,
song. It's the key of the song. That's
yeah,
mathematically, yeah, you can actually figure that out
right.
pretty easily.
Well, one of the things that hasn't been really looked into much is that if you do find the fundamental frequency of a person's voice when they're speaking about any particular subject or anything like that, if you also have the phases and the magnitudes of all of those
Hmm.
overtones, you basically have their true fundamental signature, their true
Uh,
overall vibrational signature, because uh, you have the relationships of all of those overtones as well as just the frequency. And that, as far as I know, there's no systems out there except for the sensorium that I've shown you that can actually not only determine the true fundamental frequency, but all of those overtones and the magnitudes and the phases of all those overtones at the same time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's nobody else in the field that's doing what you're doing as far as looking at the amplitude, as far as the emotional content
Mhm,
of volume fluctuations over time.
mhm.
And there's no one else even close to looking at anything around phase and timing of the harmonics. And
Yeah,
that's like a whole nother realm because when you talk about the actual carrier information on top of a frequency. That's like really the whole deal, right? It's really the whole deal. And hardly anybody has even attempted to try to take all those parameters and actually all the parameters. Everybody's looking at only a few of the parameters, and you're the only one looking at all of the parameters to try to decode it. And you got a little help from the other side, I think, as well, too.
well, I think all of us do, and they help you at whatever level you're at. I think the same thing about you. You know, all the things I've seen you do
Hmm.
with your events, all those things that you've never even gotten to, all those things that you were planning with Stephen Wynn over in Vegas and all that with
Hmm. Hmm.
the big events and the domes and all that. You've not really gotten to that yet. So
Uh,
I
we just
think,
got approved for that as well. We
no,
got
that's
they're going to do
fantastic.
30 venues around the world someday when
Wow.
it opens up again.
Well, yeah, well, we definitely need to talk and about that because I think we have some really amazing technology that can be used in events like that to bring the people closer together.
Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and let you take off, and I might pop in with questions here or there, but go ahead and tell us how sound works.
Okay, you disabled my screen sharing. Can you open that up so I can?
Okay. Okay. Cool. Let's see. That's one multiple. Should be under screen here. And share. Oh, okay. Here we go. All participants. Only all participant. Okay. Okay. That should do it.
Okay.
So there you go. Oh boy. Look at that desktop.
Yeah, it's way overloaded right now. I got way too many things going on. Okay, so get rid of that. Get rid of this, and here we go. So thank you, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to share our work with your your team and your participants and your members of your school and everybody else, anybody else that's watching today. The name of my company is InnerSense Incorporated. We incorporated in 1984, so we've been doing this for a long, long time. And we've been waiting for the world to kind of catch up with us. I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, when we were talking about vibrations into the body, people would just look at us like we were crazy. And no one ever really understood it until they experienced it. Once they actually experienced the technology, they were always like, oh, wow, yeah, I get it now. And there's no questions after that, because what we do is more of an experience than a teaching. I'm actually going to be trying to share some of the things that we are doing today, but those are just words. The actual power of all of our work deals with just the experience and helping a person get into a state of mind, as I said earlier, where they can have an epiphany or an aha moment. And what we've discovered is that when that happens, it truly does affect true and lasting change on a person. I've even had people jump up in the middle of a session and run out the door, say, apologizing and saying that they just got it and they've got to get home to either sculpt something or work out an equation or paint something or deal with a relationship. Just right off the bat like that, if they have one of those kind of aha moments to where they just suddenly see through all of the noise and see the truth behind it and what they need to do next. So when I was in school, I went to a college that was a little obscure college in North Georgia that was associated with the University of Georgia. But it just happened that that little school was sort of a sister school of some of the other main schools, like at Berkeley and other places like that, where the psychology department was based on humanistic psychology as opposed to clinical psychology. They are now calling that transpersonal psychology. So I think I wound up going to one of the very first schools that taught as a degree transpersonal psychology. And this is a non-clinical kind of thing where they were looking at the gestalt nature of things and that sort of thing. And so some of the teachers there were like Stan Groff taught there a little bit, or was uh, a temporary presenter there. Raymond Moody, who did all of the death and passing over kind of technologies and the dark mirror and all that came from him. Um, a lot of people, if you go and you check West Georgia University out, you'll see a lot of the people that are in the field now have come out of that school. Uh, in fact, it was the international headquarters, maybe still is, for the International Parapsychology Group. Um, uh, William Roll is one of the famous people in that industry. So a lot of those people came out of that school. I got a really great education about human machine um, chemical interfacing. My degree was in biochemistry. And you probably have heard before that back in those days, in the late 60s or in the early 60s, we were doing a lot of experimentation on our brain waves or on our brain chemistry. And I actually loved it. I kind of wanted to live there, but it was obvious that there is a compensatory lag time when you pop a pill like that and you change your brain chemistry. You feel great during that experience, but then the next day you don't feel so good because it seems to rob you of some of your neuropeptides. So I actually vowed, I devoted my life to coming up with a way of experience those, what they were calling altered states of consciousness. I always called them non-ordinary states of mind, but I devoted my life to coming up with a way to achieving those kinds of experiences without having to pop a pill. And what I finally came to realize is that there's a pharmacy inside of our brain, and we're the pharmacist. We can write a prescription to feel any way we want to feel, but most people won't do that, or some people won't do that. Usually, a person will let somebody else that's close to them or some situation they're in to write the prescription for how they're going to feel. But we discovered that that's not necessary. We're the pharmacist and we can write the prescription to feel any way we want to feel. So that became kind of like a goal for me is how do I teach a person that there's a pharmacy inside of their brain and they can feel however they want to feel at their own will, when and where they want. So by the time I finished with this, when I graduated, I had come up with a new theory that I call the theory of sensory resonance. And the theory is based on the human autonomic nervous system. And this is sort of an expanded model of the standard model because the standard model says that we normally are in a state of homeostasis, which is a balanced state between the sympathetic stimulated mode and the parasympathetic relaxation mode. And we go back and forth between these two modes from this center point called homeostasis. And the standard model basically says that if you go sympathetic, most scientists will relate that to the fight or flight syndrome. However, there are other things that happen there that hasn't really been fully studied. The so-called sports high, spiritual bliss, spiritual ecstasy, those kind of experiences are sympathetic nervous system responses, but they don't have anything to do with the fight or flight response. So the theory of sensory resonance says that once you leave homeostasis and you go either way, you speed up or you slow down, either way, you have to make a choice. Is that experience a challenging experience or is it a threatening experience? And if you choose threat, you go into the so-called fight or flight response. If you choose challenge, you go into what we call sensory resonance. And the same thing happens on the other end in the parasympathetic um, mode. If you begin to slow down and you decide, oh, I'm really tired, I need to recharge, I need to escape for a minute, then you will go into parasympathetic dissonance and you will go to sleep down this way. If you don't go to sleep and you hold on to that deep experience and you choose challenge that I'm going to stick with this, you go this way and you go into parasympathetic challenge that also leads to sensory resonance. Here's another way of looking at it with the homeostasis here in the center, and you can either increase in rate or decrease in rate. And once you choose whether it's a challenge or a threat, then it will determine whether you go into sympathetic dissonance or sympathetic resonance, or the same thing on the other end, parasympathetic resonance versus dissonance. And you can kind of see what's going on there. In dissonance, you have that fight or flight syndrome, and it's filled with fear, anxiety, worry, pain, repulsion, hate, jealousy, anger, hurt, and all those things that come from sympathetic dissonance. Or if you choose challenge and you go into resonance, these are feelings of profound exhilaration and inspiration and joy and peace and a sense of well-being, all those kinds of things. Going this way leads results basically in self-mastery. Going parasympathetic and sticking with it as a challenge and going into parasympathetic resonance leads to self-realization. So up here at the top at sensory resonance, you have both self-realization and self-mastery coming together. Then it leads to peak experience in health and life, whereas the threats lead to anhedonism, which is the inability to experience pleasure, illness, and death. So I devoted my life with coming up with a way. How do I get people to get into this sympathetic resonance idea instead of going this way, which seems to be the way normally people seem to tend to want to go about their lives and see everything as a threat. And they wind up in these dissonant states. How do I get them up here into these resonant states? One of the main things that I learned in looking at this was that the only connection that consciousness has to its environment, its internal environment and its external environment, is through the sensory mechanisms. And so we started doing all this work and all this research on the sensory mechanisms, which eventually led to the development of what we originally called vibrasound, which was a hydrosonic fluid mattress that is filled with a colloidal mineral suspension that matches the sound characteristics of human tissue fluid, such that when you lie down on this mattress, you become one with this mattress. And anything that's played into the mattress, any kind of sound or frequency or voice or instrument or music, feels like it's being generated inside of the body and coming out of the body rather than like you're laying on something that's vibrating. We made a major discovery between the difference between oscillation and vibration. This liquid crystal mattress is a true vibrator. If I lay somebody down on this mattress and I put 100 hertz into this mattress, only things that are resonant to 100 hertz in their body will basically feel it. Whereas if they lay down on a solid material with speakers or something like that attached to it, it becomes an oscillator. And you put 100 hertz in there, it oscillates the entire body up and down, and every cell in the body gets vibrated at 100 hertz, whether it's resonant to that or not. So when you're doing very specific frequency therapy, this fluid hydrosonic way of putting the frequencies in is way superior to the oscillation modes of speakers or transducers attached to solid materials. And over the years, we began to add the other sensory mechanisms into it. So you can see from this picture here that a person is lying here on the table. They have a little dolphin that also vibrates laying on top of them, so that they have standing waves happening between this dolphin on top and this liquid crystal mattress underneath. There's a visual projector that projects virtual reality or any of our latest quantum biofeedback technologies up onto a screen, so that with their eyes open, they would see dolphins swimming or flying through space, or one of the visuals from our biofeedback technology. There's also technologies that are able to turn the frequencies that the person is listening to and feeling into physical light vibration pulses that are either introduced through glasses or through this little arm that has the glasses mounted on it, or through our latest technology called the Illuminex stage light, which is a reflected entrainment system. It's a 1 million lumen light that sits in the floor and reflects against the ceiling, and it can turn the entire ceiling of a home or a full dome or anything like that into the light and sound device, so that nobody has to wear any glasses. So by the late 90s, I had pretty much brought this technology to its latest, greatest embodiment, which is, I believe, our 13th generation of making this particular table. And in the early 90s, I was sort of forced into try to proving how does it work. I mean, to me, it was very simple. It's just a better way of experiencing music and light and sound and color. But all the doctors and the pretty much the whole industry, the establishment wanted to see the science behind it. How does it work? Why does it work? So I set out to uh, explain that to people. And let's see if I can open up another video here. It's not down there. Come on. Um, open. Let's see if it's here. Yeah. So in 1999, after apprenticing, I'm after apprenticing under a number of people around the world. I wrote this book called Harmonic Law, The Science of Vibration, where I tried to bring together what all the different people were saying about how all of these things about light and sound and color and all that relate to each other. And when I finished with this, writing this book, I actually was trying to illustrate the book. And during the illustration, I was sitting in my living room one night and I had about 40 little diagrams drawn up on pieces of paper. And I had those lying all around me in the floor so I could get them in the book at the right place. And it was like I woke up from a dream and I suddenly realized I was like the hub of a wheel, and these papers were laying all around me like the spokes of a wheel. And I stood up and I looked down on it, and suddenly I saw how it all fit together. Let me back off of this a little bit so you can see this entire chart. So I suddenly saw how all these things fit together in um, one way of explaining it or showing how it all relates to each other. So I created this chart, and basically you've seen this many times before. It's really just an expansion of this chart. This is the standard electromagnetic spectrum. And you can see that it gets chopped off down here at radio waves, and it gets chopped off on the other end at gamma rays. And the standard spectrum says that it ranges from radio waves up to cosmic rays. But all my life, it never really made sense how God or whoever created this or whatever created it could have just chopped it off at both ends. So I became really interested in understanding, how does this vibrational scale terminate at both ends? And what I found was that it's not linear like this, it's cyclical like this, to where both ends of that standard scale are brought together at the top here as an ellipse instead of a linear kind of thing. It's now a cyclical kind of thing that starts here at the quantum constant, the Planck constant, as the fastest, shortest wavelength, highest frequency, and shortest time moment. And it increases, or it slows down actually in frequency until it gets all the way back around here to the gravity constant on the other end. So everything on this chart from this end all the way around to this side is all relative cosmic reality that's relative by frequency. So all of these are frequencies. And if you look over here, you can see them identified where it starts out at potency, which becomes force, which becomes elementary particles that come together to form atoms that join to form molecules that are used together to create cells that make tissues and then organs and then organisms like human beings, and then superorganisms like planets and star systems and galaxies. Here you see the Milky Way galaxy at the very end of the scale here. And way out here on the end of the galaxy, you can see our little solar system, and the Earth is right here. So this is kind of a map of where you are in the whole frequency range is out here on this little planet uh, inside of the Milky Way galaxy. But all of these things, from force all the way back through to galactic terms, is all relative by frequency. This chart, I call it the absolute scale of relative cosmic reality, because here where it terminates at both ends, I've attempted to show the absolute values that I believe are holding this relative part of reality together. We're not going to have time to get into this because it gets really, really deep when you start talking about absolute values and how they come together. But to me, I just kind of see this as the old adage about how God has the universe stretched out before him like a curtain, like this curtain here. And this is one hand and this is the other hand, and it's stretched out from here to here, but it's being controlled from the absolute nature of reality. The other quick things I can show you about this chart is over here on this side. It's actually showing that each one of these kingdoms that life, each one of these levels or kingdoms that life evolves through, uh, has to go through 7 stages of process before it can get to the next level. So force goes through 7 stages to become elementary particles that go through 7 stages to become atoms. And then that whole thing continues on to where each one of these kingdoms of reality go through 7 stages of process before they can jump to the next level. And over here on this end of the chart, I've actually taken communication or sound or music uh, uh, components, and I've broken them down to things like the style and the tempo and the time signature and the pitch and the melody and the harmony and the instrument being used and the waveform being used and that sort of thing. And I've listed all of these different components of sound or music microstructure here. And then in these columns, I actually attempt to really show what happens when a musician modulates that particular component of music. So a person that really understood this could use this to write designer music and know what change in each one of these little components actually does to the listener. Then down here, this was just all correlations between light and color and sound. And then down here is at the very bottom is what I call triune nature of reality. So there's about 50 different triune relationships going on there that shows how pretty much all of nature has this triune reality that has two different polar opposites of each thing. So everything out there has a polar opposite that creates this duality. That cannot be unified by bringing them together into one thing. It can only be tri-unified by having a third associative force arise that resolves the difference between these two opposing forces. Like a good example of that would be the current political situation that we're in right now, where we have these two extremely opposing opposite forces. And then you have people that try to get into the middle and become moderates, but that doesn't really work because you can't satisfy both ends of a duality like that. The only place that can be resolved is from a third position that's equal distant from the other two that can differentially choose between those other two. I don't want to be all of one thing or all of another. When it comes to my 216 or my two teenage daughters, when it comes to their education, I want to be 80% liberal and 20% conservative. But when it comes to their sexual life, I want to be 80% conservative and 20% liberal. So I want to be able to differentially choose between those two opposite extremes through this third position. And so that brings me back to, let's just talk for a minute about the concept of frequency and waves. And to study that, you actually have to look at the whole picture. Now, pretty much everybody in our industry is really hung up about this concept of frequency. You hear every time you hear somebody talk about it, there's a frequency for that or frequency for this. And everybody's talking about the frequency, but frequency is only one of the main components of a wave. The frequency is shown here as the number of cycles in a particular time period. So we measure time in seconds. And so on this scale here, we have 3 seconds and we have three peaks, one, two, three peaks within that 3 second period. And so that would relate to 1 cycle per second. So what we're looking at right now is a 1 hertz or a 1 cycle per second signal. And you can see that the frequency comes from the number of cycles per time period, but there are other things going on here too. The height of the wave is called the magnitude or the amplitude of that wave. And it basically shows the volume or how much of that frequency is there. And then the wavelength shows the distance between the peaks and the valleys. And then the most interesting concept of this is called phase. This is the relationships of the different peaks to each other. And one of the major discoveries that we made when we were studying all of this was that there are a difference between these two waves, even though most science tries to add them together and call them the same thing. One is called the sine wave, and the other one is called the cosine wave. And we were studying, let's see if I have a picture of it. I don't have a picture of it here, so let me just give you the equation. There's an equation that describes this wave here, and the equation says, well, let me move to this one. This is actually a complex wave, so you can see this would be like similar to the signal coming off of a stage with a whole bunch of people playing at the same time, or this could represent the signal coming down a wire going to a speaker to broadcast this particular wave out as sound. Engineers are taught that this complex wave is comes from or is built from a bunch of simple sine waves that you see down here below. So they are taught that each one of these sine waves come together to make up this. So you could consider each one of these sine waves or a different kind of wave coming from a different instrument or a different person that are all being summed together into this complex wave here. One of the things that they're really not taught, though, is that each one of these simple waves can either be a sine wave or a cosine wave or some combination thereof. They're not just all sine waves. If and it depends on where you start your measurement to determine what they are. Um, since the you can see here the cosine wave starts at 100% of its energy and slows down and becomes real again, whereas the sine wave starts at zero energy, and over its lifespan it becomes real and then drops off again. So the scientists refer to this one as the real component and this one as the imaginary component. And but when they get to talking about these complex waves, they don't thoroughly explain how each one of these waves can be either a sine or a cosine wave. If I were to take the measurement right here at this point, we would call this a cosine wave because it starts at 100 and it drops off. Whereas if I were to start measuring from here, we would call this a sine wave. And but whenever you sum all these together, sine waves and cosine waves, you come to together as this complex wave that you see up here. So we started studying this, and if you look at that, if you look at the equation says that the complex wave equals the real times the cosines times the frequency, plus the imaginary times the sine waves times the frequency. And if you were to go online and do a study or do research for sine or yeah for sine wave and cosine wave, you'll get millions of hits because physicists and engineers use those in just about every calculation that they do. But if you were to go do a search on real and imaginary, you don't get very much. In fact, you get hardly any at all. So when we started researching this and asking mathematicians, physicists, engineers, what are these real and imaginary components? We were told that they were mathematical functions that are required to solve the wave equation. But our response is, but yeah, but what are they? Where did they come from? Well, they're just functions, mathematical functions that allow you to solve that wave function or wave equation. But that wasn't enough for us. We started studying it, and we finally made an amazing discovery that the cosine waves are a temporal component that are coming from things that are happening over time, whereas the imaginary components are spectral components that are coming from the spectra. So a good way of looking at this would be if I had a violin laying against the wall over here and it was just lying there quietly, making no sounds, it represents pure potential. It could represent the pure imaginary potential. It can make any melody or any sound like that, but it's just lying there quiet. It doesn't make any sound until somebody picks it up. A musician picks it up and starts playing it, and they relate to those frequencies or those spectrums over time, and that's where you get that real component. And the same thing happens in a person's brain waves or their heartbeat or their voice. Right now, you're hearing me speak, and part of what you're hearing is coming from my instrument. It's coming from the imaginary parts of myself that are my instrument. It's coming from my vocal cords and my resonant chambers and that sort of thing. But it's not, but you're also hearing how I think and feel about what I'm talking about. I could leave that part out and keep talking, but I would sound like one of those guys in Battlestar Galactica who's really a computer and has no inflection in the voice. Or I can make my voice really passionate, but that's really coming from how I'm thinking and feeling about what I'm talking about. It's really not coming from my instrument. And our major discovery was is that all human suffering stems from that difference. You can observe in nature that whenever the personal aspects of something is better integrated with the impersonal aspects of that something, the outcome is better between like a player and an instrument, between a driver and a vehicle, between an operator and a machine. Whenever those two things are better integrated, the outcome is better. And so we set about to come up with technology that would allow us to improve upon that relationship. So let me get back over to my other. Where did it go? Open this one back up. Okay. Um, Yeah, here is actually for you, you want to take a screenshot of this or write it down. Here's the actual wave function equation that says the complex frequency equals the real times the cosines times the frequency plus the imaginary times the sine waves times the frequency. So we began to develop technology that would let us address this. So this was the first quantum biofeedback technology that we created. We call it the porticle. Basically, it's sort of a portal through to the other side, but also somewhat of an oracle to help guide you around once you get in there. So we call it the porticle. And the way it works is this: as a person speaks into the microphone, and the first thing it does is it separates these real and imaginary components and draws an image here called the porticle, which is basically just a Cartesian graph where it shows all the frequencies, amplitudes, and phases of that particular signal. But we know that this is a time domain component of what we're looking at. We really want to see a spectral domain component. We want to see what's on the other side of the quantum veil. What kind of spectra does this kind of create? So what we do is we take this particle and we turn it into a diffraction gradient and we shine a pure white light through it. And instead of putting a screen on the other side to see what does that project, we put a lens on the other side that refocuses that image into a one-dimensional um, frequency or one-dimensional state, and it puts it right inside the vertex of a torsioning torus. And then we torsion the torus and populate all of these areas of the torus with this information. But it's 12 dimensional. This works with a 12-dimensional string theory kind of approach, to where this torus is not just a single torus. There's 12 tori stacked inside of this outside one, such that you can only see the outside dimension. We have another algorithm that unthreads this torus so that you can see a cross section of it that we call the matrix, that is projected that back to the person to where the person sees that. And at the same time, they hear the real and the imaginary components that have been separated, put into the ears, one in one ear and the other in the other ear. So the brain actually has to associate those two different signals and reassemble them and rearrange them inside the head. So that's the reason we call it a quantum biofeedback technology, is because you're actually seeing the geometry of something that you just spoke. So you're actually seeing something in real time, That is the patterns, the geometric patterns that actually create is something that you spoke earlier. So this is actually seeing what's going on the other side. This is the user interface to it, and you can see that we not only show the portico, but we show three versions of the matrices. This is the real, this is the imaginary. When those are brought together into the complex, it shows all three. And it basically, you can see that these ones have color in them because the color is the undistributed potential that still exists that's not harmonized yet. You can see in any one of these, you can see that there's white in there that's on top of the colors. So whenever the red and the green and the blue actually balance each other out, they become white. The red is material, physical things. The green is mental, emotional things. And the blue is intangible or spiritual kinds of things. And whenever those are all balanced together, they become white. It's hard to see the white when all the colors are there. So in these versions down here, we have the real, imaginary, and complex, but all the colors have been removed. So you can actually see the harmony that is currently present. And there are real-time indices running to where you can see the distributions, the frequencies, the music notes that are being spoke, where they're at with the manifestation cycle, how much energy is there, whether it's going out or coming in. So there are a lot of different things that you can determine from watching these images. There's also an upgrade to this to where you can put on a headband that lets thoughts control this in addition to or instead of voiced expression. So you can put the headband on, and this whole area down here enables where you can actually determine 16 different states of mind that a person might be in at any given moment. So you can see their awareness and whether they're introspective or extrospective. You can see their energy levels. You can see whether they're feeling connected to something or repulsed or pushed away by it. You can see their orientation in time, whether they're in the past, the future, the present, and a number of things like that. We actually created this for gaming so that a person could have this input back into a game that could help them decide or help the game decide which avatars to let them run into, which information to give the person, and which experience or um, which experience to put them in so that they can further progress and actually learn something at the same time. So we call that the portical. Um, and we began to create different technologies from it. Um, this is a list of all the technologies, or most of the technologies that we've created from that understanding of real and imaginary. So here you can see several different vibrotactile kind of systems that we have. This is our state-of-the-art wavetable. This is the fluid transduction system that I mentioned to you. We also have it as a massage table or as a reclining chair. And now we have little pads that fit into the chair that can let you turn any chair into a vibrotactile kind of situation. This is the portico that I just mentioned to you. This is the headband that allows thought to control it as well as expression. This is a new little device that hooks up to this that lets your brain waves feed back your thoughts directly into your vagus nerve. And then over here, we have another technology that uses the algorithms to ask water to do the same thing that we're asking the person to do over here, which is basically acknowledge the need to change, give up the resistance to the change, remove any unwholesomeness or obstacles in the way, and then letting go of the old and stepping out into the new. You can't really see what's happening with a person while they're doing the portical. But if you take the wires loose from the headphones and ask water to do it, the water goes through this process of rearranging itself. So it begins to cavitate and implode inward on itself and vaporize itself and go to its next highest level, which is vapor. For a human being, it would be spirit, but this winds up being a metaphor for what we're asking the person to do. And when a person drinks this water, it's probably the most powerful technology we've ever created. Recently, we've brought all of this together into a new piece of software and hardware called the Sensorium sensory interface that allows you to hook all of these kind of technologies up to it and write programs from it so that all you have to do is hit the run button and it can coordinate. It basically can synthesize, generate, synthesize or synchronize and program any known vibrational phenomenon. So it can make flashing lights, it can make colors, it can make sounds to 16 decimal points of accuracy, it can make different kinds of waveforms, it can make tactile vibrations, magnetic fields, plasma fields, any kind of vibrational technology. This technology can generate it and synchronize it and program it into programs of any length of time. Here's a couple of shots of my latest studio. This is my daughter laying on one of the wave tables here that you can see. The equipment's back here to the right behind us here, but you can see that the environment is very special, and a person kind of decides what they're going to think about experience when they first walk into the door. So we try to create these inner sense environments that puts a person in state um, even before they have the experience. So there's another shot of the other side of the room. And you can see back here some of the equipment that we use to drive the system with. So let me show you. Let me just put these down because sometimes Zoom does not like all these programs running together. So let me close that one and see if I can open up the portico. As I mentioned, Zoom sometimes doesn't like these real-time programs because they require so much. Um, they I'm sorry, excuse me. They require so much computer power and processing power that it's hard to run a real-time program like this on Zoom. But it just takes a minute for it to install itself and show up here. So let's just give it a minute. And here we go. And so this is what I was explaining to you earlier. This is something called the portico, and this is where it's taking my voice right now, and it is distributed on this Cartesian graph where this horizontal line is the cosine real plane. The vertical axis is the imaginary sine wave plane. And if I be quiet for a second, you'll see that this will settle down. But as I begin to start speaking, you can see that it's actually populating this with my voice. And let's see if I can get this to work. I mentioned to you that it is actually a torus. And you can see this torus right now, but again, you can only see the outside dimension. But you can notice as I'm speaking that it's actually populating the surface of this torus with my voice. So I can move this torus around and look at different aspects of it. But we can only see one dimension here because we're on the outside of it all. But if I have another algorithm that can unfold that and change it back to a cross section. And if this was done on a person that had never done any work on themselves, the pixels just randomly distribute. But the more work a person's done on themselves, the more geometries start showing up. And you can tell an awful lot about a person just from the geometries that are showing up. And you can tell a lot about where they're at in time. This is the present moment on this axis right here. Everything to the right is the future. Everything to the past or to the left is the past. You can see all kind of geometries going on in here, circles and different kinds of geometries going on, reaching all the way out to the edge. This is the core self in the center. And the more it reaches out this way, you get into the environment. So you can tell whether a person's really kind of just all about themselves and all about their core self, or you can see how well they reach all the way out into their environment like this to affect change on their environment. So that is the complex wave. This is the real version of it. This is the imaginary version of it. And then those all come together as the complex wave. As I mentioned to you, I can take the colors out of it like this so that now you're only seeing the places where all of my energy is balanced in all these white areas here. So this represents my true harmony at the present moment. Or I can add the colors back in, and then we're back to the parts of me that really need to be redistributed. And then here again, I don't have the headband that I can put on, and I don't really have time to show you all this, but this is the area that enables when you put the headband on that lets you see what's going on with your, lets your thoughts control this as well, or as addition to your voiced expressions. So that's the portico. Um, this is another program that I showed you that is sort of a control program that can synchronize and not only synchronize, but it can generate and synchronize any known vibrational phenomenon. So this is the user interface right here. Um, and you can see if I'll show you again in a minute on my website where you can go and see a video of this in action. So you can see all the different things that it will do, how it will make colors. For example, I can choose a color down here and then go full screen with it to show that particular color. Or I can type in a frequency down here, let's say 763 hertz, for example, and then it'll actually show me what color that is. And that happens to be a very deep red kind of color. So I can get the color by typing in a sound frequency, or I can enter in the hue and saturation and lightness colors, or I can just grab this little controller and then just control um, what's going on here by just sliding this little bar over. Come on. And so I can slide this little bar over and I can actually choose the color that I want to choose and then full screen it like this. It also has a built-in subharmonic resynthesizer that lets us lower the frequencies that are being put into it. Sometimes we'll use this if we're using music that is very high end, like flutes and strings and things like that, to give them a little vibration so that it can be felt. We also use it when we're using when we're doing voice analysis on particularly women that have a high frequency for their voice. And this lets us lower that down so that they can feel something in the tables or the chairs from it. It has a 12 tone bank in it where you can put tones, different kind of tones into it. It has a scope down here, so if I start putting in frequencies here, it'll draw them out as a waveform here and show me the final wave from all of those tones. And then this is our latest thing, which is really cool. We call this the fundamentalizer. And you can see as I'm speaking right now, it's actually notating my voice on this piano scale here. And it's actually doing it with that true fundamental frequency analyzer that I mentioned earlier. So you're looking at the true fundamental of my voice right now, jump around all over the place as I'm speaking here. And it's actually drawing the shapes of the waves up here. And it's actually assigning the correlated color to that note onto the key and up in this little screen up here. And you can see the chroma phase um, the chromophase control actually changing as I'm speaking here, and it's choosing the colors based on the sounds. Over here, it's telling me the frequency, the fundamental frequency that I'm speaking, along with the magnitudes, the closest note that I'm speaking to, and how far off of that note I'm deviating from. And it's taking this fundamental frequency and it's putting up here in the tone bank, and at the same time, it's listing all of the phases and the magnitudes of the harmonics of that fundamental over here. So I can actually say, copy this to the tone bank, and it actually copies it over here to the 12 tone bank with my original fundamental and all of my voice signature here. And then this can be used to write programs from. So you can start off with this fundamental frequency and go to any of the other tones or frequencies that you want to do to really personalize the experience. Um, One other thing I'll show you is that this can go full screen here. If I go full screen with it and move this out of the way, then you can, now I'm watching myself speak in colors rather than in tones and frequencies. These are the exact, to 1 hertz accuracy, the right shade of the color. It's not just all red or all green. It's 16 different shades of colors that gives you correlation to 1 hertz accuracy between the sound and the light. All right. I'll show you a couple of other things that we're working on that are also really cool um, and unique. This is our latest application that is a digital cymoscope. I know that you're probably all familiar with cymoscopes and cymatics. And here we have a cymoscope that we have control over the viscosity of it, so it can be thick, it can be like water, or be much thicker. We can even change it to a solid color, so that instead of having just a grid like this, we can make it solid. So this would be more like a uh, canality plate where they put the sand or the silicone beads or whatever over it, and they vibrate it from underneath so you can see the vibrations of the sound. So I have full control over the color of this thing, so I can make it pretty much any color that I want. And then I can perturb it like this to where we can actually see the waves coming off for that particular frequency. And the let me put a number of frequencies in there. So this is going to be like a multi-frequency thing. You can put music through here or any kind of vibration through there. And the reason that this is so unique is that unlike a regular cymoscope where it's impossible to make the cup that holds the water specific enough to reproduce itself, so you get different patterns depending from the same vibration if you can't control these edges. But with the digital scope, I have full control over these edges. In fact, I can make it square like this, I can make it circular or any way that I want it, and then I can perturb it. And you can see the way that it works from like a regular cymoscope way. But we can also, we've made this 3D, so we can actually turn it sideways like this. And where now we're at the edge of the water, the very edge of the water, and we're looking across the surface of the water. See if I can get that just right. Come on. Oh, come on. I don't have my mouse today, and it's hard to control it exactly. But now if I perturb it from the side, you can see what the wave would look like if you were looking down the surface of the water rather than looking at it from the top. And again, we can change the colors of this to whatever. So this is just a very simplified version of it. The one that we will release soon will do complex waves, so you can put music or anything like that through it and see that. And with the fact that it's reproducible, 100% reproducible, we can actually uh, uh, I'm sorry, since it's reproducible, we could actually start doing science with this now, since we can get the same patterns by putting certain frequencies into it. So we are poised and ready now to move to the next level of all this with our science. So let's see. Let me call back up. Let me open this one, and here we are again. So um, move this out of the way so I can. Oh, come on. Like this, so now you can see my screen again. Yes. So I think that's mostly of what I really wanted to talk about today. Are there any questions? Do we have time for a Q&A?
Oh, wow. It's hard to come up with any questions. Um, I don't know what to ask.
Well, I think that the takeaway from this is that mostly relating to that screen that I showed that showed the vibrations and how let me open this one back up and show you again. Where is that slide? I have so many presentations here. I can't remember where the slides for each one of these things are. And we try one more. I believe it may be this one. Yeah, here we go. So one of the main takeaways from this experience would be that there are different components of waves. It's not just about frequency. And it's difficult to really rely totally on frequency because there's a number of issues with it. Like we talked about before, the human voice has a really wide range of frequencies, so it's hard to nail down the fundamental frequency unless you're doing it by the method that I was showing you with the sensorium. And then secondly, it's difficult because there are different formats in the voice.
Harmonics.
Yeah, well, no, they're different formats, Formants.
Yeah, those are normally made of harmonics.
Yeah, but they are specific to the individual and but more specific to actually the dialect that they're
Yeah,
speaking. I don't see it. I
yeah.
don't see it right now, but
It's
uh,
just the harmonics
basically
based on that. Yeah.
they're based on vowels.
Hmm.
So if a person makes a voice statement that has a lot of U's or a lot of O's or a lot of E's or I's or those other vowels, the frequencies tend together around those particular formats.
Hmm.
So we're not sure really what that means. It could mean that those particular things are important to a person, that they speak mostly in that vowel or mostly in another vowel. There's just
Hmm.
not been enough work to be done on that yet. But the point I'm trying to make is it's just tricky to rely on frequency alone to do vibrational therapy. It needs to include all of those components that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier.
That's
Uh,
if you're doing voice. If you're just doing, you find a frequency of a cell, you can like, feed it energy by just finding its frequency or turn the volume up and explode it, right? So there are certain things you can do with frequency that are very, very useful. But, I mean, I think when you're looking at actually even destroying a cell, it's like to find all of its components and match it and then turn the volume up, that would destroy it. Or to even resonate it into health. You find all the components and resonate it into its health with
uh,
the combination of frequencies, the exact phase, the envelope or change in volume
Exactly.
over time.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
If you're just using just the frequency, uh, if I had the frequency of a person's heart, now you see these CDs and things out there that say, oh, well, this is the frequency of a heart. But that's kind of impossible because frequency is determined from density and dimension and a number of other things. And so the heart of a little baby is going to be totally different from the frequency of the heart of a grown man.
yeah,
But either way, you're if you just use a single if you had the right frequency of a person's heart, and you use a sine wave to put that into the person, you can vibrate that heart, but you're basically just saying blah 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 to it. You're not really giving it any information.
yeah,
The
yeah.
information is on the phase and the amplitude.
Hmm. So, so if we were to look for a person's template of perfection that they're born with, how would we find that?
Well, that would be back over here again to what we were showing you when we were online with you several weeks ago,
Hmm.
uh, using this new program called the Fundamentalizer.
Hmm.
And let me just call it back up here real fast. Um, Here it comes. Come on. Yeah, here we go. So, so with the Fundamentalizer, like this, then you're actually, as I'm speaking, you can see the fundamental frequencies of my voice are changing right here. But this is a true fundamental. You'll have to go back and read the paper that's on our website that describes why this is different from just an average um, Fourier transform, and how everybody else is getting the average frequency of the voice. This is really the
Yeah,
true fundamental in the
yeah.
moment, but it's also showing the phases and the magnitudes of all of the harmonics based on that. So if I capture that in any one given moment, I have it right here in my tone bank, and I can begin to write programs from this. So I make it do like maybe 10 of these different things and capture 10 different fundamental frequencies from the person with all of their overtones. And what we're beginning to see is that the relationships of all these overtones are the same depending on where the fundamental frequency is. So the fundamental frequency will change, but the ratios of all of its overtones will pretty much remain the same. So here we actually have the true vibrational signature of the person.
So you're saying that is not just where they're at, that's their template of perfection they were born with?
Uh, well, I don't know that that's, no, it would be the template of who they are at that moment.
Yeah, yeah. So how would you find, how do you think you might find the template of perfection? Will we have to like do a voice analysis on the baby in the beginning or yeah.
Um, well, uh, I don't know. That remains to be seen as more research is done on all these overtones. This is something that nobody's really done before. Everybody's looking at the frequency, but nobody's really looking at all of its overtones. And once we know more about this, maybe we will find out that adjusting any one of these particular overtones would have tremendous effects on the person.
Yeah,
Where
cool.
if you could raise or lower a particular overtone, that might have specific effects on the person, but that's still unknown.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, what we've been looking at in our research is when we're looking at the different organs is to look at the relationship of the overall frequency. I mean, you know, the overall frequency of that organ, and you could even look at the harmonics in relation to the other organs. So that would be a musical interval relationship, right? And then if you start looking at the musical flow, because the flow without blockages is really the whole deal of health, right? When you have a flow, which could be even the flow of source. So then you're looking at the actual flow going through the system, right? So even if people have different frequency hearts, we can find the relationship between those parts, and then ultimately one day the music through each of the 11 systems.
Right. And this is the thing that I didn't get to show last time. It's not working in real time right now. I can't find the microphone with this for some reason. But this also is just an extension of the fundamentalizer um, that actually does what you're used to. It's actually doing the mode, so it's capturing the true fundamentals over time and showing
Yeah,
you.
I've never done that. Never heard anybody doing that, so I'm
uh,
not used to that.
and so it's very informative to know. It's kind of similar to the voice analysis systems out there where they're just doing hits on particular notes. How many times you hit an F sharp or how many times you hit an F, but this is frequency specific instead
Hmm.
of just going by music notes.
Hmm.
It's actually
Cool.
giving you the actual frequencies that are surrounding this particular note, and you get a total modal description of how the person um, relates to a particular subject, like, for example, that they may be talking about. And these will change depending on the subject that they're talking about.
Uh-huh. Cool. Cool. Well, great, Don. I mean,
One other
it's
thing, one other thing you can see here is you can see the note that the person is speaking, and you can see how much they deviate from perfect on that note. So we have a lot of people using this now that are voice coaches where a person can just speak into this and you can see whether they tend to go sharp or they tend to go flat, and
mhm.
help them, improve their voice to where they can get right on those notes.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you for your presentation. This always blows minds
My
incredibly.
pleasure. My
Yeah.
pleasure. I enjoy speaking to your members and your school and all of that. It's been a real pleasure over the years to be able to speak to these newcomers into the technology so we can start helping people get out there and really understanding the true essence to frequency and vibrational therapy and how it really works. There's so many different ideas about it out there, and everybody has their own protocol. And I'm hoping that over the next few years, we can kind of start collating that all together and form an organization, and maybe even a professional organization um, that people belong to, that make sure that they understand the true essence of vibration and how it all works.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the basis of the Medical Sound Association. We're going to
Exactly.
do that open meeting for the conference on Saturday at 1:30 on
All
November 14th. Yeah, if you're welcome to
right.
show up.
Is that a group discussion?
Yeah, it's open. Anybody that wants to come in, and then we're going to be doing biweekly meetings from then on. It's about how to find the frequencies, combinations of frequencies, and musical intervals and musical flows to heal every disease in the world, whether it's
Oh,
breaking it up or actually resonating it into harmony.
well, send me a link to that. I'd love to join
Okay.
and participate if that's possible.
Cool, cool. Well, thank you for all of your amazing expertise and experience and
Thank
sharing
you.
it with everybody. The way you put it together is really mind blowing. It's really cool. It's really inspiring, actually.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, David. Thank you very much.